Today I wanted to share my cost of living in Asuncion, Paraguay versus some of the other places I've lived, including Texas and Spain. I wanted to start out explaining why I'm shooting this video today. I've been asked by many people, how much do you spend living here in Asuncion, Paraguay? And today we're going to talk about the basic necessities of life. We're going to talk about rent, utilities, food, dining out, insurance. That's where we spend most of our money. Of course, transportation is also part of it. All right, let's start out with the biggest expense, rent. Unless you're fortunate enough to own a home, rent is your biggest expense. No matter where you live, rent typically consumes up to 50% of your monthly net income. And I think the same may also hold true for people living in Asuncion, Paraguay. Whether you are an aspiring future immigrant to Paraguay or whether you're just looking to spend a few months per year in the country, it is important for you to get a better understanding of the general cost to rent an apartment. The apartment that I'm renting here is in an upscale building. It is not the nicest building in the city, but it is one of the better buildings. And I'm paying roughly $900 a month for a 2-bedroom apartment, roughly, I would say 80 square meters. I haven't really measured it, but I'm guessing it's about 80 square meters. And here are a few more important considerations. First of all, the place I'm renting is fully furnished, and I'm actually quite picky with what I accept. And I looked at probably 10 to 15 apartments before deciding on this very deal for a number of reasons, and we're going to get to this too. So the $900 a month is naked. You know, it does not include electricity or internet. What it does include is water and trash. Water and trash are typically included when renting an apartment in Asuncion, Paraguay. You may think, hold on for a moment here. $900 a month is actually quite expensive for an apartment located in a developing country. Yes and no. It depends on supply and demand. One of the things you have to know about Paraguay is that because of its geographic location, a lot of products are imported from overseas into Paraguay, increasing the cost of the goods and services that you consume here locally. And this holds true for furniture, this holds true for electronics, it holds true for a lot of items. So typically you are going to pay a much higher markup on a lot of the products you need to place inside your home, right? A lot of the things you need. For instance, the washing machine I have in this home, it's from Italy. And because it's from Italy, it for sure is more expensive than anything produced in the Mercosur region, if it's even available. This fact alone, and let's not even talk about furniture. I mean, some furniture are produced here locally in the Mercosur region, but some are also imported from overseas, right? So it depends. But the $900 a month, it's for a 2-bedroom apartment. It's in one of the better neighborhoods in Asuncion. It takes me about 10 minutes to walk to Shopping Mariscal, and it's about a 5 to 10 minute Uber drive from Shopping del Sol. And if you want to be within this nice, tight vicinity of the major malls, you may want to consider renting in one of the better neighborhoods. Now, it is true that you can find a long-term rental for less than that, but you can also pay more than that. In fact, you can pay as much as $2,000 to $2,500 for a 2-bedroom apartment in the best or an even better building. It's all available. Just to put this in perspective, I used to pay more than $900 a month for an unfurnished 1-bedroom apartment in Fort Worth, Texas. And like I said, the apartment was unfurnished. It did not include internet, did not include electricity, no furnishings whatsoever. And this is what you get, right? So here you probably, or I in this case, get double the value. Plus, I have just a much better quality of life, correct? In every way, shape, and form. The quality of life here is substantially superior when compared to the quality of life in a place like Fort Worth, Texas. The food here is better, and we're going to get to this in a moment. In fact, what I pay here for dining out and the quality of food that I receive when dining out is uncomparable to what I have had in the US. In fact, the food that I have here for the price, it is inaccessible. It is impossible to obtain in a lot of American cities. So you see, you pay about the same, but you get double, triple, quadruple the value. I also want to throw in here, if you want to rent an apartment in Europe, there are a couple of things to consider, because a lot of you guys are EU nationals, you want to come into Paraguay to apply for residency and potentially settle down here permanently. One of the things you need to understand is that in Europe, in a lot of places, it has become close to impossible to rent an apartment. What do I mean by that? First of all, you need a guarantor in some cases, and the truth is here, you may also need a guarantor. However, in places like Spain, where I own real estate, it is very difficult to rent an apartment as a foreigner unless you have an employment contract from a local company in Spain, unless you can put down, say 2 to 3 months deposit. And a lot of Spanish landlords these days expect you to pay as much as 12 months up front for you to be able to rent the apartment from them. Why is this happening? Well, Spain and many other EU countries have a prolonged history of EU nationals migrating to their countries where they were just put in a very bad situation. I'm talking about the landlords. They were put in a very bad situation because they accepted foreigners into their apartments with maybe just a 1 to 2 month deposit. Back in the day, it was much harder to evict people in Spain. And of course, Spain is just one example. So a lot of the times, they were getting people into their apartments and maybe they stopped paying, or maybe they had damaged some things, and so it was very difficult for Spanish landlords to recoup money from foreign tenants. Whereas now, Spanish landlords have become a lot more thoughtful about who they are handing their properties to, whereas before it was just so easy. And I'm speaking from experience because it was also much easier for me renting in Spain back in the day versus today. But like I said, I own real estate in Spain now. In other places in like Central Europe, if you want to rent an apartment in Central Europe, oftentimes what happens is that you actually have to go through a real estate agent and they charge you like 2 to 3 months commission. Here in Paraguay, the commission is half a month, right? And you can negotiate that even. It depends on who you're dealing with, but half a month commission is quite normal here. In the US, the commission is almost nothing. However, you pay an application fee, you pay maybe like a processing fee, there may be some other fees too, but I would say in the US it's not that bad to rent actually. Assuming you have the income proof, you have a good criminal record certificate, it's not very difficult to rent. In Europe is probably one of the hardest places to rent an apartment these days. Why? The agent fees are crazy, the laws are crazy, and especially for landlords, but it depends on the European country, right? And whether that's the European Union or Eastern Europe, non-Eastern European countries, it really, really depends. But here in Paraguay, it's like half a month commission, that's typical, plus 1 to 2 months deposit, and this is something you can negotiate as well. A lot of landlords would propose 2 months deposit. However, you should never accept the first offer that you receive. You always want to negotiate. And I'm a pretty tough negotiator myself. I don't accept the first deal that's presented to me. I negotiate so that we can meet somewhere in the middle. Oftentimes you don't get what you ask, and they also don't get what they ask. So what happens is that you meet in the middle and you agree on a deal that makes sense for both parties. That's how you do it. Next, electricity. This is something very important, especially when you live in a either very cold country or a very hot country. Now, Paraguay is a very hot country where you're gonna run up crazy electricity consumption. That's just how Paraguay works. For like 6 to 8 months out of the year, Paraguay is very hot, meaning you're gonna have to use your air conditioning if you are in your apartment and when you're inside your apartment. Now, I've checked my electricity bill from last month and I was actually shocked because I learned that it was only about 180,000 Paraguayan guarani, which comes down to, I believe, about $25 to $27. That's all I paid last month. And that's for a 2-bedroom apartment. And some, hours, some days I'm running 2 air conditionings in 2 rooms. And given these very reasonable energy prices, if you compare this to a place like Spain, and I had my air conditioning running in Tenerife, which is located on the Canary Islands, also a lot, and with much, much less usage, much less consumption, I actually paid 3 to 5 times that. So you can see, because Paraguay is home to some of the cheapest hydroelectric energy in the entire world, plus Paraguay is home to an abundance of energy. Energy is very reasonably priced here. In fact, it is one of the cheapest countries for electricity in the entire world, which is great because it is a hot country, so naturally consumption increases during the hotter months. To be fair, there are certain months out of the year in Paraguay where you may not have to use the air conditioning very much at all. Maybe just a few days a month during certain months, like maybe like in June, July, because it's cool here, it's cool to cold, so you may not have to use air conditioning. Heating is also not necessary here. Maybe like a few days out of the year you may need heating. But anyway, you get the point. So anyway, talking about my cost of living here and what I pay for electricity, it's almost nothing. It doesn't bother you, and that's for like a 2-bedroom apartment, like I've said. Now, just to make a quick point here about electricity costs in the United States, where I lived in Texas, I pay a lot more as well. Now, in the US, we have central heating and central air conditioning. Now, how central air conditioning and central heating works is that it's for the entire apartment, so you can't really control it at all. So when you turn it on, it's going to cool down the entire place, or it's going to heat up the entire place, which naturally leads to a lot more energy consumption. And because of that, my energy bills in like Texas have been much higher than here, right? But electricity is also more expensive in Texas than it is here in Asuncion, Paraguay, but it's not so bad in Texas, right? It's quite affordable, but it's not as cheap as in Paraguay. Now, Wi-Fi is another important point. You need internet, you need Wi-Fi, and the question is, how much does it cost you? Now, I have 600 megabytes per second here, which is, I believe, about the fastest that you can get. And I pay roughly, I think, $60 to $70 a month for this plan. What's good about this plan is that it's not a horrible price. It's not as cheap as in the US. In the US, you could probably get 1 gigabyte per second for the same amount of money, or maybe a little bit less. So comparing it to America, it is a little bit more expensive here, but it's not like double or triple. It is slightly more expensive, but it is not something that's going to break your bank account, right? Now, when we compare this to Europe, the internet in Europe is probably about the same as in the US. You know, you're probably going to pay about the same, maybe slightly more, maybe 10-20% more. So I think Paraguay is also slightly more expensive. The internet here is slightly more expensive than it is in Europe, in a lot of countries, but it's quite reliable. If I compare to other countries I've been to in like Northern Africa and Tunisia, where it was almost impossible to get a 4K video uploaded, even one that was just a few minutes long. Here, to upload a 5 gigabyte video only really takes me about 5 to 15 minutes, depending on the hour of the day I'm uploading it. Now that we talked about everything that we need at home, and obviously there are a couple more things I wanted to address in this video, which leads us to the next point, which is dining out. Dining out is a big expense. For me it is. I spend probably about $1,000 a month on dining out. And you may think, wow, that's crazy, that's a lot. I know it is. And it depends as well. If you're dining out alone, if you're dining out with your significant other, obviously costs ramp up. One of the things that I have spotted as soon as I arrived here in Asuncion, Paraguay, was that it was just so much more enjoyable to dine out here versus in the US, where people take very little time, unless it's a weekend. But here people really take their time when dining out. Don't be surprised to spend an hour to 2 hours when dining out at night. It's completely normal. In some cases, people may even spend 2 to 3 hours. Okay, it's not unheard of, it does happen, and it's very enjoyable. Plus, the food quality here is substantially better than in the US. In Fort Worth, Texas, the kinds of meals that I'm having here for the price that I'm paying in Asuncion, Paraguay would be impossible to get. Even if I'm willing to pay double or triple the price in the US, I'm not even gonna get half the quality that I'm getting here. And because I'm native European, I have very high food standards and very high dining standards. And because of that, Asuncion, Paraguay just makes a lot of sense to me. While I immigrated to the United States of America to start a business and become wealthy, it has become increasingly more apparent to me that the quality of life has suffered a lot while living in the United States of America. Whereas here in Paraguay, I see a much closer comparison to the life and the quality of dining out that I was used to when living back in Europe. Even it was already many years ago. It feels a lot more homey. It feels a lot more rational to me, because a meal is supposed to take longer than just 10 to 20 minutes, and it's supposed to look differently. It's supposed to provide a different experience, which always came short in the United States. So the $1,000 a month, and again, that's just an estimate, and it does not really include dining out like twice a day. I mean, sometimes I do, but when I go out, I typically don't care how much money I spend. So that's one of the things here. But as we've talked about on this channel, and as you've probably heard from clients who we interviewed on this channel, you can spend as much as $100 to $200 for a dinner here as well, if you want to have a bottle of wine. And I don't drink wine at the moment, so if I were to add wine to the equation, guess what? The price would increase substantially. So you really need to know how much you can spend on dining out here. For me, it's now about $1,000 a month. And like I said, that probably gets me 10 to 20 dining out experiences every month, but decent ones at the better restaurants. Groceries is another important and big expense that we have on a daily basis. And I typically spend, I would say, about $200 to $300 a month on groceries. Now you might think, well, that's kind of low. And it is. And the reason why it's low is because I dine out more than other people. And so I don't cook as much as I used to. The last time I was in Asuncion, I cooked more than I do now. Life changed and my routine changed. So I spend more on dining out today than I did a year ago. That's how we look with that. But if, let's say, you were to cut down on your dining out, or you were not to eat out at lavish restaurants, or you would just do it maybe, I don't know, maybe like a handful of times a month, you can probably get by with a dining out budget of, I don't know, maybe like $200 to $350 a month, and you can dictate the remaining, let's say you have $1,000 per month on food, or even if you just have 600, right, or 500, I don't know what your budget is, but let's say it's half. You spend $250 a month on dining out and the other $250 on groceries, you can have a really well balanced dining experience at home and outside. But anyway, one of the important points about groceries here is that the quality is superior, and there are just a lot less pesticides in the food here that you buy. That's a fact. They use less hormones, they use less pesticides, so the food quality here is much better than what I experienced in the US. You can't compare it. I mean, to be fair, you can buy your foods at Sprouts and you have pretty good quality, but it is very expensive. You're going to pay a lot more when doing your grocery shopping at Sprouts in the US versus here in Asuncion, Paraguay, where a good portion or the majority of the food is not so much full of pesticides, hormones, antibiotics, and so forth. And just to compare this very quickly to Europe, I would say the food quality in Europe is kind of comparable to here. It is more expensive, no doubts about that. And you can spend, or you would spend a lot more dining out in Europe than you would here in Paraguay, but the quality would be about the same. You get really good food standards and very good dining experiences in Europe, but you'd probably have to pay more for a number of reasons, right? It's just more expensive to run a restaurant in Europe than it is in Paraguay, right? Rent is higher. The restaurant owners, they pay more in rent. They pay more on groceries. Salaries are higher, right? So everything increases the cost. Whereas here, the median salary is relatively low. I think it's about $300 to $400 right now. That's the minimum salary, by the way. The median salary is much higher than that, right? Because you do have a lot of wealthy people here in Paraguay. However, the dining out cost is very much affected by the factors that I just mentioned. Transportation is another very important expense that everyone has. Shelter, food, transportation. Everyone needs transportation. Even if it's just a few times a month, you need transportation. But depending on the neighborhood you live in Asuncion, you may need very little transportation each month. If you live in one of the better neighborhoods where everything is nearby, everything is within a 5 to 10 minute walking distance, that's important. You can reduce the amount of money that you spend on Ubers. Maybe you don't need a vehicle, you don't need a car, you don't need a bike. And guess what? You may pay more in rent, and you may also pay more in food, but you're not going to have to buy a vehicle, which is a big money consumer. So you can obviously have a car anytime you want, and the parking at the malls is actually quite good because, first of all, it's free for many hours. Sometimes it may be hard to find parking because the malls are just crowded, there are a ton of people, and it's difficult to find a parking spot, especially on Fridays and Saturdays. And Saturday is the peak point. Like if you go to Shopping del Sol on a Saturday, you will know what I'm talking about. It's almost impossible to find parking. And in the other malls as well, especially Shopping Mariscal, is also a little bit hard for parking on weekends, especially on Saturday. But if you want to use Ubers, they're very inexpensive here. And I'm again talking about my cost of living here. So this whole video is about my cost of living, what I do. You can do whatever you want. You can design your lifestyle as you wish. You don't have to clone my lifestyle by any means. I'm just expressing my personal experience, how much money I'm spending, what I'm getting for my money, but it is ultimately your choice how much you want to spend and the value you want to receive from your experience living in Asuncion, Paraguay. Ubers are very inexpensive here. So where I live, I spend anywhere from $1.30 to $3 per trip. And that trip gets me to any of the malls I want to go to. It gets me to my dentist, my dermatologist. It gets me to a lot of places here. And that's about what I spend, $2 to $5 per trip. The $5 is definitely on the higher end, and I spend that maybe on a Saturday when it's very crowded. So typically I don't spend that. I spend about $1.30 to $2.50 per trip. And you don't have to worry about parking. You book the Uber and it's usually here within a handful of minutes, and you don't have to worry about parking, paying for parking, nothing. Another big question that we're getting a lot is about insurance. How much is health insurance? It's a great question. Depends on your age. It depends on your medical condition, depends on many factors, but typically you can get a medical insurance for as little as $50 a month. And you can go to any of the major private hospitals. You can go there, you can sign up for an insurance plan, but the more comprehensive the plan is, the more you're going to pay. So it's very possible you're going to pay a lot more than $100, but it's starting at about $50, depending on your age if you're older, and you may have to do some medical exams before the hospital may approve you a plan. But for a guy my age, we probably spend about $50 to $100, and I'm in my mid-30s. Now we talked about health insurance. What about paying out of pocket? You know, how much do you pay? Let's say you want to get basic dental cleaning done. How much does that cost you? Basic dental cleaning can cost you as little as $15 or $20, or as much as $100. It depends on the dentist you choose. And that's basic dental cleaning. Maybe sometimes it also includes a little bit deep cleaning underneath certain gums if you negotiate that before. Consultations are usually paid. They don't really do free consultations here. You may get lucky with a dentist or two, but typically nobody wants to do free consultations. You have to pay. You can't expect the business to offer you a free consultation. It's part of their business practice to charge for paid consultations, but they're not very expensive. I want to briefly talk about the healthcare costs in the United States, where I live, and why this is a much better mousetrap here. Now, I've mentioned in some of my videos how I was about to get stripped out of my money from dentists, from veterinarians, from all kinds of medical professionals in Texas, where they have no second thoughts about the amount of money they charge for the services. But here it is very inexpensive to do a lot of the things, including veterinarian visits for your pet. Let's say you have a dog or cat, you pay a lot less than you pay anywhere in the US, right? It's just a lot more affordable, and you don't need to get pet insurance. You can just pay cash because it's affordable. In the US, if you need anything done, even basic, oftentimes the dentists, they aren't even going to do the basic dental cleaning unless you get a full examination, unless you agree to deep dental cleaning, which most of the times is not needed. And here, if you go to a dentist and you tell them that you just want the basic dental cleaning, they do it. They're not going to force you to do deep cleaning if you don't want to. They're not going to force you to get a filling if you don't want to. They're not going to force you to get a crown if you don't want to. They're just going to have you do the basic dental cleaning as you requested. That's how things work here. It's very lenient. There's no force. There's no pressure. There's no hard selling. It's just very convenient. If you want more services, you can get them, but it's not a requirement for getting the basic services. And that's why I delayed my dental procedures in the US, because they were overpriced. They were trying to take advantage of me, and they thought I'm a fool, but I didn't pay and I didn't fall for it. So I do everything that I need to get done here in Asuncion, Paraguay, and I'm very happy about that. So if you want to get like a crown, you can expect to pay anywhere from $100 to $300 for a crown, probably. If you want to get a filling, a white filling, it's probably going to cost you anywhere from $20 to $80, depending on the dentist. And in the US, right, these prices are astronomical. You're going to pay 3 to 15 or 20 times that amount. No kidding. If you want to get a dental implant in the US, you're going to pay up to like $10,000 for that. You're going to pay thousands and thousands of dollars, right? Here, you can get it for like 10 to 25% of the money. And it's probably about the same service, and you're going to save a lot more. In Europe, let's just have a quick look at the dental costs in Europe. They're very affordable. If you need basic dental cleaning done, they're not going to force you to do the deep cleaning. In fact, they want you to do as little deep cleaning as possible, because deep cleaning is horrible for your gums. In the US, dentists never mention that. They want to do it every 3 months because it's a great revenue generator. However, it is terrible for your gums, and that is proven that it is bad for your gums. So in Europe, they never force you to do that. In Europe, for the basic dental cleaning, you're probably going to pay about 50 to 100, depending on the European country you're in. In Spain and Portugal, it's going to be cheaper than in Germany, Holland, and other countries, right? I think this pretty much concludes everything that I wanted to share with you in this video. That's my cost of living in Asuncion, Paraguay, and also compared it to the cost of living, the prices that I experienced in Europe and in America. If you're interested in obtaining a residence permit in Paraguay, please don't hesitate to contact us. You should see our website displayed on the screen. I've also added a link to the description of the video. I appreciate you. Thank you so much for watching Nomad Elite, and I look forward to welcoming you to this beautiful country.